Greetings, listeners in Listenerland. Welcome to St. Louis in Tune with Arnold Stricker and Mark Langston, where we size up current and historic events involving people, places, and things in areas such as the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, health, history, housing, humor, justice, and sports. We originate from and connect the gateway city to our country's current cultural fabric and lives. I'm sitting up straight. Sometimes people think classical music is stuffy. Well, I have a couple degrees in music, and it's not stuffy to me, but it depends upon what your exposure is to it and how it was exposed to you. And in studio, we have Kathy Lawton Brown. She is actually the midday host for Radio Arts Foundation Classic 107.3. She's been a professional singer and still sings. But she was a professional singer at age 17 and became one of the first female members of the United States Air Force Band's singing sergeants in the Washington, D.C. area. She's also a featured soloist with many choruses and orchestras, concert band, and chamber ensembles in the United States, Canada, and China. Serves on some local arts organizations, including the Desmond Lee Music Collaborative, the Artists Presentation Society, and the St. Louis Children's Choir. Kathy, it's good to see you. Welcome to St. Louis in Tune.
Thank you so very much. It's great to be with you, Arnold. It's good to see you again, too.
Yeah, it's good to see you. We saw each other at a common contact.
Indeed.
He was one of my college roommates, Chuck Sipe. He played trumpet with Randall Sheets, and they played a concert, and you helped arrange that concert.
I kind of did. Actually, they had played for my late husband's funeral at Arlington. Randall is the organist of record and the official organist for the chapel there, the old chapel at Arlington. Right. And Chuck is a former Army Band player, as you well know, and just a marvelous trumpeter, and the two of them played Dave's funeral, and it was really great. It was the perfect send-off for him. Not only did they play, at my request, the Forêt Pavane, which they did their own arrangement of. It was just glorious. But they also, at my request, finished up as they left the chapel and everything. I said every time that we did any concert, we always finished with Stars and Stripes. Dave was, of course, a flutist. So he was always out there on the stage with the little piccolo obligato, you know, the da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. I had them play Stars and Stripes as they took him out. And everyone just cracked up because it was just Dave's sense of humor. And
right.
I'm sure that was the only, at first and last time anybody will ever ask for that in the old chapel, but it was just perfect. And our former commander, Colonel Arnold D. Gabriel, was even there. He's just about to turn 97 the end of this month, the 30th of this month.
Gabriel he did a lot with Midwestern Music and Art Camp in Lawrence at University of Kansas. And Chuck, my roommate, he had gone to the music camp. Wow.
He's an icon.
Yes.
What a privilege, especially at such a young age, to have been able to work with someone of that stature. He's still just doing great, but Chuck and Randy were just phenomenal. And so when Andy Peters, who was at Second Presbyterian Church, was looking for something this past fall, I said, call Chuck, and Randy would love to check out that fabulous organ, and Chuck will love the dynamics and everything. And there you go. So at my recommendation, they came in, and I wound up narrating their concert, which was a lot of fun, too. And you were very much a part of the Three-Cornered Hat medley.
I got to participate in some visual representation of one of his solos. And that, matter of fact, that interview, folks, you can check out the interview we had with Randy and Chuck on stlintune.com and just punch in trumpet and in the search engine, you'll find it there.
Yeah. Both phenomenal musicians.
They both are. And
top notch.
Talking about phenomenal musicians, we have just a fine quality of musicians here, whether they're in chamber orchestra or whether it's full St. Louis Symphony Orchestra here, whether it's Opera Theater St. Louis, the whole nine yards. The arts here in St. Louis are very strong. And one of the things that the station that you work at and what you do is provide that kind of, I don't want to call it entertainment, but you provide that venue of listening for people in the area. And
yes,
talk about the history of the station a little bit, if you would.
The history is very interesting, and we do have our own sort of philosophy, which I'll get to in a minute as I give you the history. We actually are an outgrowth of what used to be Classic 99, which was, of course, the vaunted KFUO-FM, which was in business over 60 years, a Marconi Award winner, which is a national award in broadcasting, just in case folks don't know what that is. And when they went dark, there was about 3 years where there really was not a classical music station. Right. There was a consortium of people who came together who said, we cannot have this kind of cultural fabric without having a classical music station.
Vacuum.
Yeah, and it's a point of gathering, if you will, for all of the arts, and that was the tradition we wanted to continue,
right,
and make this really happen. And when you look at all the different arts we have, we've got dance, we've got theater, we've got visual arts, we've got photography, we've got architecture, we've got so many things besides music itself, and then look at all the various shades and types of music there are. We have a hugely active chamber music group here.
Absolutely.
Groups here in St. Louis. And so what we wanted to do was to be the friendly voice that pulled it all together, that point of reference, that gathering point. And our philosophy is not to be stuffy, but to be embracing. You're talking about having to sit up straight. Sit at attention. This is serious music.
Don't fall asleep.
Don't fall asleep. That's right. You fall asleep, somebody's going to poke you with their umbrella. And it is so much fun because we are able to get engaged in that dialogue and that discussion. And sometimes just by virtue of the fact of what we're doing, we're able to connect different groups too, like, oh, you're looking for that, and so sometimes will be a point of reference. Hey, we're wanting to do this, who would you recommend? And it's really great to have that kind of open discourse, and I think it's very necessary for a community like St. Louis. We have a large footprint, but it's also deep in the arts.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put that. It's like a consortium of contacts.
Yes, sir, it is.
And that people will go to, like you said, to find maybe a group or where are things being played or things like that. And so the station really is, what, now like 8 years old maybe?
We just celebrated our 9th birthday in April.
There you
so
go.
Now we're working on our 10th year.
Wow.
Isn't that exciting?
And we're having Kathy on because there's an event that's coming up. I'm not preempting this, but let's talk about this because people may be tuning in and tuning out based upon what they're doing during the day. June 3rd from 6 to 8:30 p.m. at the Community Music School, there's going to be an event. And why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, this is going to be fun. For those of you who like, as my father who was Irish used to say, for those of you who like a nip of the creature, we have a fundraiser called Classical Cocktails. But by the way, you don't have to be an imbiber in order to enjoy this. This is just going to be terrific. We have a beautiful sponsor. I'll get to them in a moment. And we have classical cocktails. The Chamber Music Society of St. Louis is going to be providing the music. We're going to be getting together at the Community Music School, that great big atrium that's there. We're going to be in that space. There will be some lovely hors d'oeuvres and yummies, courtesy of White Box Catering. And then we also have Switchgrass Spirits that will be providing the cocktails. And they are a new entity in St. Louis.
Right.
They're a whiskey and brandy distillery, and they specialize in small batch from everything. Their slogan is small batch from grain to grass. And they have single malts. They have wonderful cocktail concoctions, pardon the pun. Whiskey, which is infused with the mellow flavors of charred Missouri oak barrels. Makes you want to salivate, doesn't it?
It's making me
hungry, and I'm a little waiting for a nip of the creature. And this is going to be a terrific event. It is a fundraiser for us, but it's also a community ability for us to get together as a community, especially with COVID these last couple years.
Right.
Holy smokes, these last 2 years have been the longest decade of my life. I don't know about you.
You know, we were talking about that a little bit off the air, and we talked about it, folks, so you understand, I'll frame this up a little bit, in the context of people just being able to talk to one another and not talk at each other, or when a word or group of words are mentioned, or, gee, I hear you're either red or blue or Republican or Democrat or independent or whatever you're talking about. Some people, it's like the wall goes up immediately rather than having the conversation. This is an opportunity because music will knock down, my words, a lot of walls that people put up because there's a lot of emotion in music and people gather it differently, and that is the common link I think that we have with a lot of things like that.
So true. Arnold, you couldn't put that any better because, and you're a musician, you get this. Music transcends the verbal.
Absolutely.
People make judgment calls on the verbal. Music allows you to let go of a lot of that judgment. And I think that when we get into these verbal discussions, if I say, I like earphones, and someone has 95 other assets that they ascribe to me because I like earphones because that's a taboo subject, then all of a sudden we're not communicating. And so that timelessness of music is what really is what music's all about. That's what we try and do at the station, is to be out of the way, but to present that timelessness. An interesting little factoid here. With COVID hitting, many people began to listen to us and stream us online.
Oh, wow.
And our audience grew exponentially because it's something that transcends time, because it is something that puts you into a much better place. And it is not the harangue of what's going on at the moment. It is timeless. It is something that survived the ages, and it puts you in touch with that inner, you could call it grace, that inspiration, whatever you want to call it, that's within each of us.
Absolutely. And one of my questions that I have is, why do you think that music that we would call classical music, because it takes the range of, you could go back to Renaissance, Baroque, and real classical music, romantic music, modern music. What is it about that music that really excites people, and what is it about that intimidates people?
Oh, that's a great question, because I think it speaks to all of us. And I think a lot of people who are new to classical music, and we do have a lot of new listeners, not just because of COVID, but a lot of people hear that and they go, oh, that's pretty, and they stay with us a little while, and then they find out something about the composer or whatever. But the thing is that if you're walking through a garden, you don't have to be a botanist to know that particular flower over there is beautiful and you like it. You don't have to know that it's a rudbeckia.
Right. That's a great illustration.
You don't have to know the technical name of it. Oh, Black-Eyed Susan. Okay, but it's beautiful. Intrinsically, it is beautiful. It is a reflection of timelessness, of creation. And so I think that's where music has it all over words.
I don't think people realize, when you were mentioning that, I was brought back to a point at which I was watching a movie. It was The Godfather.
Oh.
And I think it was, I want to say, it had been, I can't remember which one, but it was at the end where the daughter's murdered.
Oh, yes.
And the music in The Godfather is just very moving. Oh. That music moved me. It wasn't the scene. It was the music portraying the scene that moved me to tears.
Yeah.
And I think about this, that if you withdrew, and folks listen to this, if you withdrew music from movies, how powerful would the movie be?
Can I share a little story with you?
Absolutely.
In my checkered past, I have taught for a number of years. For 30 years, I taught on the college level, and one of the classes I taught was music appreciation, which I laughingly called music depreciation. And, of course, at the beginning of class, I would always say, okay, how many of you are in here because you need a fine arts credit? Oh, 90% of the hands go up. I said, okay, as long as we're here, let's have fun.
Right.
One of the things that I would do is, this is when Top Gun was really popular, I would play Top Gun with no sound. You know, that very first, if you will, ballet on the deck sequence when they're launching the Tomcats off the deck. And it's exciting, it's beautiful, it's fascinating, and it gives you that wonderful visual. And this is serious business because they're going out to war. And I asked the class after I played that sequence, how long was that? I go, I don't know. 7, 8 minutes maybe, and we sort of took a class panel discussion there. Then I played it with the music. It's 3.5 minutes long.
Wow.
And it's so much different because seeing those scenes without that danger zone underneath
Right.
there, bop, and it makes an enormous difference. And like you said, it affects us. It helps to create the movie, which is why I have such a huge admiration for people like John Williams
Oh, yes.
and Nino Rota and so many of, golly, I could go on and on. James Newton Howard, and there's so many it's hard to even think of them all, that have just really made music, or made the movies perfect.
They really have, and that's a great point because there's sometimes when my wife is trying to sleep and I can't sleep, I'll get up and I'll watch something, and I'll just put the credit or the byline on, or the whatever they call it, the closed captioning on, and I'm not listening to the music. I'm watching a movie and I can still hear the dialogue because I'm reading the dialogue. The movie's not as powerful. It doesn't have the impact that it does because of what you just said. That music and the dialogue and the visual, it all wraps itself up in a package that's delivered, and which is supposed to speak to us.
It's really true. Try watching Secretariat without music sometime. And it's wonderful, but not Secretariat. Yeah, no.
Seabiscuit, right.
Seabiscuit.
Right.
Fabulous.
That'll be
Fabulous
interesting.
music.
I'll have to try that one.
St. Louis in Tune strives to bring you informative, useful, and reflective stories and interviews about current and historic issues and events that involve people, places, and things. Our topics cover a wide range, such as the arts, crime, education, employment, faith, finance, food, health, history, housing, humor, justice, and even sports. And that's just to name a few. While St. Louis in Tune originates from the Gateway City and covers local topics, we connect to what is going on nationally as well. If you enjoy what you hear, please take time and share and subscribe to this show and listen to other previous shows that can be found on our website, stlintune.com. That's stlintune.com. Or on your favorite podcast platform. That's stlintune.com. stlintune.com. And if you've got an idea that you'd like for us to examine a little deeper, let us know by dropping us a note at stlintune@gmail.com. That's stlintune@gmail.com. St. Louis in Tune, heard Monday through Friday on the USRadioNetwork.com and many great radio stations around the U.S. and, of course, right here in St. Louis. Our website again is stlintune.com. We want to hear from you. stlintune.com.
We're having a conversation with Kathy Lawton Brown. She is the midday host at Classic 107.3, and they are the quote-unquote classic station.
Yeah.
And we're talking about having a lot of fun. They're the voice of the arts for St. Louis, and they have an activity coming up here June the 3rd called Classical Cocktails.
Yeah.
And then there's another event coming up, but I'm going to let Kathy go ahead and discuss those for us.
Sure. We'll just finish the housekeeping on Classical Cocktails, which is going to be great fun. June the 3rd. And it's $95 a ticket. You can reserve your place by going to classic1073.org/classical-cocktails. And our event chair, by the way, is the lovely, gracious Mary Forsyth. So it ought to be just terrific. All the proceeds will benefit Classic 1073 and its mission to support the classical arts in St. Louis.
And some people may be wondering, like, well, you're 92.9. And you're also on another station, and what are you talking about, other stations? And we're all not-for-profit stations here. And we all encourage the not-for-profit community. We have had a lot of not-for-profits on the show here, but it's good to encourage listening on the radio, period.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Before we even started this, we were laughing because I used to listen to a motivational speaker by the name of Jim Rohn, not the sports guy, a different Jim Rohn. And he used to say, there's a problem with trying to sink half the ship. Guess what happens to your own half? And that's really, if we get so territorial and aligned to a fiefdom about something, what we're really doing is in essence, cutting off our own nose to spite the face, because we all benefit from this. I'm a very haptic listener. I'll bounce around the dial all over the place. And I think that's a good thing to be able to do. First of all, it keeps you fresh, it keeps you informed, and it also says, okay, that's not a station I care for, but this one I really like. Find something new.
And there may be times when you're listening in because of a certain host or a particular show, or maybe
Arnold Stricker.
yeah, St. Louis in Tune, folks. Or maybe there's a special kind of thing. There's a Stravinsky festival coming up.
Yeah.
And so I want to hear what Igor's got going on there in this particular kind of 2 hours or something like that.
That's exactly right, yeah. And sometimes, too, what we'll do, I know Julie does this. She's our morning host, Julie Schuster. She's also our acting general manager and just a bright, wonderful gal. And Julie's on from 6 to 10. Then I take over from 10 to 2. And then Tom Sudholt, who was also with KFUO-FM. He and I were both with that, as was our director and engineer of sorts. He is our production director, and that is Brandon Lemieux. And he also came from KFUO-FM. One of the reasons for that is our founding general manager was Jim Connett, who had been program director at KFUO-FM. So we had that little cadre of people that were real tight. And then Jim Doyle, who regrettably passed away not quite a year ago, very suddenly. We so miss him still.
Mark knew him very well.
Oh, what a mensch. Oh, we just loved him to pieces. Yeah. And just a great guy. Now, he came to us from KMOX, but he and Jim had worked together. Jim Connett had worked together years ago and had that great close friendship. So it made a huge difference. So we are a family, and you'll tune in sometimes, and one of us will be doing at lunch with the arts, for instance. I might be celebrating the music of Rachmaninoff or a birthday. And so you have a little bit of an insight, maybe a note or two you didn't know about that composer. But more importantly, you get to hear different aspects of that person's music.
Sure. When did you get your start in radio?
Totally by accident. Actually, it started when I was a junior in college. Our college choir in Winter Park, Florida, which is outside of Orlando, had recorded a musical Christmas card for the community. And they had this really cool thing. It was a video camera that you could put on your shoulder. It was like...
I remember those were heavy.
It was about 4 inches wide by about 8 inches, and it was maybe 12 inches long. It was the bomb. Okay. Yeah. So after they had done the recording, I was talking with the guys. I said, wow, how's this work? And one of the fellows said, you've got a pretty good voice. Well, I was a voice major, so that had a lot to do with it, and good articulation. And he said, would you like to voice the ads? Would you like to do the voiceovers?
Oh.
I said, yes. That took about a nanosecond for me to decide. Right. And so that's really what got me involved in announcing.
Cool.
Isn't that wild?
And you did that even when you were in the service?
I did that even when I was in the service. We were a Bowling Air Force Base, so we were actually where they would produce the Armed Forces Radio and Television. And I did a couple of things with them. Okay. And then I did freelancing and all that kind of thing. And then one day I happened to call into KFUO-FM. This was in early 90s. And I talked to Tom Sudholt and said, my husband heard an impressionistic piece. It was either Ravel or Debussy. He heard it about 2:30 yesterday. Can you look it up? And he said, gee, you've got great pipes. Yeah. He said, have you ever announced? I said, oh, yes, for many years. And he said, we're looking for a female presence.
Wow.
So you never know when you're auditioning, Arnold.
Right. Timing.
It's all timing, and
right.
It's a little smile from above.
Very cool.
Very cool.
You've got another activity I mentioned coming up, and it deals with something red.
It does indeed. The Redbirds. We are going to have the very first ever, our inaugural classical music night at the ballpark. This is going to be June 29th when the Cards are teaming up against or fighting against the Marlins, and it is going to blast. And not only are we going to have the game, there's going to be a pre-game activity, which is a small concert with the St. Louis Philharmonic Orchestra. And so the tickets can be procured, but the thing is that you'll have not only the opportunity to hear the St. Louis Philharmonic, you'll St. Louis Cardinals t-shirt that says, meet me in St. Louis, a commemorative t-shirt, all sorts of really cool things. And all you do is you visit cardinals.com for theme tickets on June 29th, Or you can visit classic1073.org and look under events. Either way, we can set you up and get it done.
There you go. And I'm looking at the website right now. You've got a lot of different programs and educational kinds of activities going on.
Yes.
Talk about some of those, what I would call in-house kind of productions that you guys have done. You have something called the Slatkin Shuffle,
Yes.
which I'm interested in. And then you have Bach to Beyonce, which
That's fun, isn't it?
that sounds fun too.
We'll start off with the Slatkin Shuffle. One of our great friends and assets, he's also a friend to the to the Chamber Music Society of St. Louis, is Leonard Slatkin. And of course, is our Maestro Emeritus of the St. Louis Symphony, and his vast background, because, of course, for those who may not know, his father was Felix Slatkin.
Right.
So as a little boy, he was just sort of hobnobbing with all these famous names from around the world. But he has so many marvelous stories, and he, too, is an eclectic listener. I heard him do Stan Freberg thing.
Wow.
Back, I'm talking like from the late 50s, early 60s, and he played a Stan Freberg comedy bit that's a send-up, just great. But wonderful music, things that you wouldn't expect, and he does the Slatkin Shuffle as if it were on your iPad. Just so he lets the iPad do the shuffling.
Oh, wow.
So it's really fun. There's never a dull moment, and he narrates it, tells some of his stories and so forth. So it's really great to get that insight into his personality.
Kind of like a personal listening list.
It is. That's exactly what it is. And Brandon Lemieux produces that.
Okay.
And then also he produces a new program that Leonard has come up with, which is American Musical Journey, which is just essentially what one would, what the name implies about all the various American composers and things like this. And he's always been a champion of young composers coming through. So it's a fascinating insight.
Very interesting
from his perspective.
Because a lot of symphonies a lot of symphony orchestras have a focus, and maybe it takes on the focus of the conductor or of the board, where they want to just play what I'm going to call the standards, or we're just going to do modern. And I have always appreciated just a smattering kind of getting as much of a variety as you can. But the focus on American is very interesting. It reminds me of the art museum down at Crystal Bridges in Bentonville, Arkansas. That particular collection is strictly American art, and it traces all the way back as far as they can go with the collection, but very eclectic in the kinds of styles. But how the museum's laid out is just from day one of their first painting of maybe back in the 1700s, and then to current day. So it's not, what's interesting, it's not, oh gee, there's a black artist section over here, or oh gee, there's a Hispanic artist. It's all mixed.
Yay,
which is
I
what
like
it should
that.
be.
So it's more chronological as
It's
you
more
walk
chronological, right.
through. Arnold, I'm going to have to see that. You said that's in Bentonville?
That's in Bentonville, Arkansas. It's Crystal Bridges Museum.
Thank you
It's
so much
free.
for that recommendation.
It's free.
I'll see your audience members down there when I go see it, because that's just gone on my list.
Yeah. Maestro Slatkin does something very similar with American music in that way. Okay.
And it may not be chronological, but what he's doing is presenting all these different American musicians and composers, and we have a very rich history because we are a melting pot for the world.
Absolutely.
And we are oftentimes the place where people really do take off, where they've had okay careers and then they hit here and kaboom, because there is the opportunity. And I think that's a very important thing for us to recognize.
It is, that we're not only I don't want to say a springboard platform, but we give a lot of careers some stability.
Indeed we do. And certainly there's nothing that can replace having also traveled to other countries and had time in performing in, say, Germany, depending on what your specialty is, but it is really a wide open field still, even though people say, oh, I don't know, it's pretty tough. Oh yeah, it's competitive.
Sure it is.
Sure. Especially right now, people taking advantage of pirating things and stuff like that. So that's become a little bit thorny.
Right.
There's some weeds there that need to be negotiated, but the thing is that we as a country have done so much to promote music and culture and learn ourselves as well, and it's important we keep in touch with that as a civilization.
Speaking of that, Kathy, what do you think needs to be done to bring, and I know this is very much on the forefront of the symphony's mind, to bring younger listeners into the fold?
You bet.
I remember when I taught elementary music, we would always take the third grade to the symphony to hear a concert. It was young people's concert kind of thing. And it seems like with COVID, attendance falls down, falls off. And how do you, just bringing people back, but bringing younger listeners to want to support?
That is an excellent question. There are a couple of things that have been done in the past, but COVID kind of threw a monkey wrench in a lot of things there. But there are groups like the E. Desmond Lee Collaborative. I'm no longer a member of it, but I had served on it for 6 years when I was producing premiere performances with Umsel. But the Collaborative, they helped to fund buses so that the kids could get from the school and so forth. AFM, the American Federation of Musicians, had outreach concerts, and four of the guys in the symphony and myself, we would go out to various schools and perform for them as a quintet. So they've done a lot of that. We've discovered over these last few years, and we were actually in the middle of hatching this project when COVID hit. We came up with an idea. It's an extension of the idea of Classics for Kids, which starts at 9 o'clock on Saturday mornings. It's about an hour-long show, and it is music that's geared for kids a little bit more. It might be a story. It might be just listening to music with a new ear. But we came up with the Youth Education Committee that Carol Comerford, who was formerly with the Community Music School, she's our chairman. And we discussed this and decided we really needed to have something that reached into the classroom,
Right.
Something that would touch the kids, something that they could identify with, something that they felt proud about to say, hey, I'm from that heritage. So we started off, our very first project was West Africa. And so what we did was we did some research and learned about the various instruments,
Right.
that are played in West Africa, and learned about the performers and that kind of thing. And then I wrote a little script, which was full narrator. We've now got it more of a dialogue thing. But what we did was we went to West Africa with a nana, a grandmother. And this young lady, she learns about these various instruments and how they're played, and we hear them in the discussion and in the presentation from the radio. The nice thing is that this whole thing is supplemented online by audio and visual resources. So when people go onto our website, classic1073.org, did you get that? Classic1073.org, they can look up musical ancestries, and that will bring up what's called a presentation that takes you through the script, essentially the points of the script. So if you're talking about a particular kind of, like a type of a marimba, okay, it's actually got a different name. I won't go into that, but the thing is that you see how it's played, how it's built, how they put this together. There are some projects that are in here, like how to make your own cigar box violin, things like this. And it talks about the culture, the dress, the dance, all the different aspects of what really creates a culture. And so that way, when you visit West Africa, you really feel like you've had a good chunk of the culture. We are now we've just finished our 10th country, and our next one on the docket is Brazil. Some of the countries we've been to: India, Algeria, Thailand. We did Native American throughout the entire northern United States. We've been to the Caribbean, Central America, all sorts of different places that just expands the mind. We checked out Jewish music throughout the diaspora, so that's worldwide. And we had the actors that we used on that were students from one of the local temples and their music teacher. So it's been a very engaging project. We're very excited about it. It's terrific for homeschoolers. And all these things, by the way, Arnold, are cross-referenced. As a former educator, you're going to appreciate this. These are cross-referenced with the standards.
I see that.
For teaching, which is huge for anyone who's a teacher.
Absolutely. So those of you who are listening out there, you might want to encourage your music teacher at your elementary school to take a look at this. It's called Musical Ancestries, and you can get that at classic1073.org, and then Musical Ancestries up at the top under Education. You can find that.
If you've missed any of our previously aired programs of St. Louis In Tune, simply visit stlintune.com. That's stlintune.com. There, you'll find every show from our first to our most current. Use the search engine to look for a show that might interest you from one of the many topics that we've covered. And drop us a line and tell us how we're doing. You can do that at stlintune@gmail.com. That's stlintune@gmail.com. St. Louis In Tune, heard Monday through Friday on the usradionetwork.com and many great radio stations around the U.S. and, of course, right here in St. Louis. And don't forget, check out our website, stlintune.com. That's stlintune.com.
We were having a conversation with Kathy Lawton Brown from the Radio Arts Foundation of Classic 107.3. Musical and Cultural Heritage, Musical Ancestries program that is available. And touching all those countries, just how many more do you want to expand that towards?
I guess we're just going to do it until
the whole world is covered?
the whole world is covered. Yeah, and I think we know that Brazil will be our next destination. And I think after that we may visit the Ukraine, obviously being sensitive to the current situation, and we need to give people time to heal from this. So depending on timing, but that'll probably be the next one. But we've got several other possibilities in the pipeline. So this has been such a learning experience for those of us on the Youth Education Committee, which, by the way, is chaired by Charles Gooden, who was for many years with Harris Stowe. And he is just having a ball. And even our chairman of the board, Jay Noose, will occasionally just sit in on our meetings because we all have so much fun, because we're so engaged in learning all these new things.
Right.
You know? But it's really been an education for all of us. And, of course, the old saying, by your students you'll be taught. Well,
absolutely.
So this is one of a number of home productions, if you will. These are locally produced by us. And, of course, it is Brandon Lemieux, who is the one who puts these together.
Gotcha. And a Bach to Beyonce one.
Bach to Beyonce. Oh, my goodness. That is so much fun. Maria Ellis is the host for that. And she takes a little bit of the rap beat and the Beyonce things, and then also because she's trained as a classical musician, she will intersperse these things together, weave them together, and come out with very interesting programs. So that's, and there's another way to reach out to young listeners, you know, and for maybe an underserved community too, that let's make this. Music is a universal language.
Absolutely.
As are the arts. So let's embrace everybody.
And folks, if you're our generation, I should say, you know, if you're a baby boomer, you don't realize, or maybe you do, that if you watch Tom and Jerry, and if you Bugs Bunny, and you watched all the Roadrunner and all that kind of stuff,
I miss 'em.
all the music in those particular episodes were quote-unquote classical music.
Yes.
So you were getting educated. And now if you go back and watch those, you actually see how much adult humor was going on in many of those things.
My
or
goodness.
tongues in cheeks, as they
think about Bugs Bunny in the barbershop.
Yeah. That's exactly right.
And also back when they came out with Fantasia, what was that? That was in the 40s.
Yes.
That was
or maybe
actually
late 30s.
Might have been late 30s. That original Fantasia. That was actually cartoons that were put to classical music, and it gave a form and a plot to it.
Still a wonderful work, that movie.
Absolutely. Just something that...
That was a classical compliment on that. Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've said that for years. You see how comfortable I am? I'm not even thinking broadcaster anymore. I'm just being me.
A special thing coming up on Friday nights, right?
Friday nights, yeah. We have, if you go on our website right now, you're going to see that about 8 o'clock on Fridays, we have Amy Kaiser with Musical Moments. Amy has said, you know what? I'm tired. I think I want to relax and enjoy my retirement. And so she is going to finish that show, and we're going to put back Friday Night Jazz. So Jason Church's Jazz Collective will be on that evening, as will Something Else with Calvin Wilson in a little bit earlier hour. So it ought to be a lot of fun. A lot of people really enjoyed being able to tune into jazz, because a lot of our listeners who are classically trained, or even not, but just enjoy classical music, it's something where they can, let their hair down a little bit on a Friday night. Yeah, right. And enjoy a nip at the creature. There we go. We're being secular.
And speaking of which, I want to go back to the activity June 3rd.
Yes.
From 6 o'clock to 8:30 p.m. at the Community Music School of Webster University, Classic Cocktails.
Mm-hmm. That is going to be so much fun. And as I said, it's going to be in the atrium at the Community Music School. An opportunity to mix and mingle and hear the glorious sounds of the Chamber Music Society of St. Louis. And you probably know their impresario. I'll just put in that, Mark Gordon, who was for many years the English horn player with the St. Louis Symphony.
Okay.
And he is connected. Mark and I go back many years doing Bach and all that, with thousands of notes under the bridge with the two of us.
There you go.
So, but even if you have a friend who says, well, I don't really like classical music, don't worry about it. Just bring them on, because it's very relaxed. It's not that sit at attention, this is serious music kind of thing.
And
this
you don't have to be
fun.
quiet while it's going on.
No, you can actually,
You're encouraged to speak with other people.
And we've done this because of COVID, we had done it as a virtual thing the last couple of years.
Right.
It's going to be so nice to be able to see people again and just communicate.
So check that out, folks. June
Absolutely.
3rd, you can go to
classic1073.org
There you go.
and look for Classic Cocktails. And that's June 3rd, and then the Cardinals night is going to be June 29th at the ballpark. So all sorts of good stuff going on.
Wonderful stuff, Kathy. Thanks for coming in. You need
are
to come
so
back.
welcome. Oh, my goodness. I would be delighted to.
We are glad you decided to listen to this episode of St. Louis in Tune. We know there are hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and we are glad that you have chosen to listen to us. St. Louis in Tune is produced in cooperation with KWRH 92.9 FM and Motif Media Group. For St. Louis in Tune, I'm Arnold Stricker.